All right, well, today we are going to look at Chapter 1.6. This is the extension version, and we're going to kind of get into adding and subtracting fractions. Now, I know you've had a little bit of experience dealing with fractions during your, I think it was your 5th grade year, and we're going to look at adding, subtracting fractions that have unlike denominators, and we're kind of exploring the different ways of finding common denominators to use when adding and subtracting. So let's kind of get into this. So I want to first have you recall that you can add and subtract fractions with unlike denominators by writing equivalent fractions with a common denominator. One way to do this is by multiplying the numerator and the denominator of each fraction by the denominator of the other fraction. When you do that, you give both of the fractions the same denominator. That is one way of doing it. That's the first example we're going to look at. So we start off with 5/8 plus 1/6. Okay, so again, we're going to be adding these. So if I start off by putting 5/8, I want you to do the same thing, 5/8 plus 1/6. And what we can do is we can multiply the 5/8 by 6. So we're multiplying by the denominator of the other fractions. We're going to multiply by 6. And when doing that, in doing this, 5 times 6 is 30, and more importantly, 8 times 6 is 48. Now, we're going to multiply 1 and 6 both by 8. Again, we're multiplying by the other fraction's denominator. So 8 times 1 is 8. And again, more importantly, 6 times 8 is 48. Now, as you can see, we now have a common denominator, 48. It's not necessarily the least common denominator, but it is a common denominator nonetheless. So now we're going to go ahead and add. So we do 30 plus 8 is 38. And it's going to be over 48 since that's our common denominator. Now, with doing it this way, oftentimes you are going to have to simplify your answer. So we can divide both of these, it looks like, by 2. So if I divide these both by 2, I'm going to get 19 over 24, giving us our final answer. All right? That is one way of doing this. It's, again, coming up with a common denominator by multiplying both the numerator and denominator by the other fraction's denominator. Now, another way of doing this is using the least common denominator approach. So the least common denominator of 2 or more fractions is the least common multiple, the LCM, like we did in Chapter 1.6, of the denominators. We're going to find the LCM of the denominators. And again, we call it LCD. So this LCD provides another method for adding and subtracting fractions with unlike denominators. So the way we're going to do this, they show it by using the list method, which I'm not a fan of. You're more than welcome to use that method if you like. You could also use the factor tree. I prefer using the, I guess you could say, like an upside down step approach. I didn't really give it a name on the last video we did, but you'll recognize it when you see it. So what you're going to do is this. You're going to put your 6 and the 8 together. We're going to put our little box here. Is there a common number, a common factor you can divide from these? And in this case there is. You can extract a 2. So 6 divided by 2 is 3. 8 divided by 2 is 4. Are there any other common factors you can extract from 3 and 4? No, 3 is a prime number and 4 is not a multiple of 3. So we are now left with 2, 3, and 4. So we're going to multiply. 2 times 3 is 6. 6 times 4 is 24. Now we have a common denominator. So what we're going to do is this. I'm going to put my fraction again. It is 5/8. And it's going to be 1/6. We're going to add these together. And so I have to think, what what can I multiply 8 by that gets me 24? I know, and I can do this, I can say 24 divided by 8 is 3, so I can multiply it by 3. Whatever I multiply the denominator by, the bottom number, I got to do the same thing with the numerator, the top number. That way, the fraction is the same value, okay? That way it's an equivalent fraction. So 5 times 3 is 15. There's my first fraction. Now, I have to, again, use 24 as my denominator. It's my pre-chosen number that we came up with for the LCM, which is now our LCD. 6 times what number gets me 24? Well, if I can't think of that, I can think 24 divided by 6 is 4. Therefore, I can multiply the top and the bottom by 4, and I get 4 over 24. Now, when I combine these, I get 15 plus 4 is 19 over 24. I get the same answer as I did over here. However, I don't have to do any simplifying. It's already done because I came up with the LCD, and that's going to automatically simplify it for me. All right? So, let's go ahead and move on to our next part. Let's go ahead and look at mixed numbers now. So, to add or subtract mixed numbers, you're going to first rewrite the numbers as improper fractions, then find a common denominator. This is one way of approaching it. It isn't the only way, but it is the way we're going to look at right now. So, we see in our first example, we have 4 3/4, and we're subtracting 2 3/10. So I'm going to let you look over to the right over here and show you one way of doing it. So one way of doing this is by writing these mixed numbers as improper fractions. And let's go ahead and multiply. So we have 4 times 4 plus 3 is 16 19/4. And then minus 2 times 10 is 20, plus 3 is 23. So I have 23 tenths. Now, the next part is I need to find a common denominator. So I can do this a couple different ways. I can either multiply the left fraction 19/4 by 10 and multiply the right one by 4, and I can do it that way pretty easily. However, I also look at this and I think, what is the least common denominator I can do? Now, if you want to, you can use this method over here where we're going to put our 4 and our 10, and we'll say, all right, I can divide these both by 2, and I get a 2 and a 5. Then I multiply. 2 times 2 is 4, times 5 is 20, and therefore I know it's 20. Now, honestly, if you can look at 4 and look at 10 and you know what the LCM is just by looking, for these problems, I'm okay with you doing that. You don't have to do that work every time. However, if you're not quite sure, showing that work may help you, and it takes about 20 seconds to do, if that. It's up to you. So, I'm going to make these both over 20. So I'm going to multiply 10 by 2. That means I have to multiply 23 by 2. That's a really bad 2. And so 23 times 2 is going to get us, 46. And then I have to multiply 19 and 4 both by 5, because that's what gets us to 20 on the bottom. So 19 times 5, well, 20 times 5 is 100, so 19 times 5 would then be 95. So it's going to be over 20, and 95 minus 46. Well, if it was 95 minus 45, then we would have 50. But it's 95 minus 46, so it's one fewer for our answer, so it's going to be 49. So our answer is 49 over 20, or 2, and 2 times 20 is 40, so 2 and 9/20. That is one way of doing this. You're going to have to decide which way is your favorite, because I know what my favorite way is doing it, but you have to make your decision. That's method one. Another method you can do is this. You could write it this way. 4 3/4 minus 2 3/10. And what you'll do is this. You're going to leave the 4 as a whole number and the 2 as a whole number. It's going to be a subtraction problem. However, you're going to change the fractions. So again, we know 20 is the least common denominator. So I'm going to multiply the top fraction, 3/4. I'm going to multiply it by 5. I get 20. And 5 times 3 is 15. And then for the bottom one, I'm going to multiply it by 2 on the top and the bottom. 2 times 10 is 20. And 3 times 2 is 6. And then I'm going to go ahead and subtract. 15 minus 6 is 9, so 9/20. 4 minus 2 is 2. So I get the same answer either way. I have my preferred method. I'm not going to tell you what it is. I'll let you decide what you think is your method you prefer. Okay? So let's go ahead and move forward. What I'd like you to do is for 1, 2, 3, and 4, you're going to use the least common denominator to solve 1 through 4. And all they want you to do is rewrite the fractions with the same denominator. That's all you have to do, nothing else. Then for 5, 6, 7, and 8, you're going to complete each one of these statements using less than or equal than, or less than, greater than, or equal to. And we'll pause. We'll check in after number 8, and then we'll see what we have to do next. Okay? So pause, try them, and see how you do. All right, let's go ahead and take a look, see how we do on these problems. So, for number 1, we're going to have both 6 and 8. We can use 24 for our denominator. So I put 24 here, I have 24 here, because I know 6 times 4 and 8 times 3 is 24. There's no denominator, or no denominator that's smaller that they both have in common. So 4 times 6 gets me 24, so I'm going to do 1 times 4 to get me 4 up here. And then over here, we'll multiply these both by 3, giving me 9 over 24. So those are the common fractions here, my new fractions here with the same denominator. Now with 7 and 10, since 7 is a prime number, I can just multiply 7 by 10 to get 70. So 70 is going to have to be our common denominator. That's the smallest one they have in common. So I'm going to multiply both of these by 7. I'm going to multiply both of these by 10. Okay, so I have 7 times 10 is 70, 4 times 10 is 40. Then I have 10 times 7 is 70, and 3 times 7 is 21. So our new fractions here are 40 over 70 and 21 over 70. All right, for this one, 9 and 12. Maybe you can't tell right away for 9 and 12, so we'll try this one over here. We'll do 12 and 9. I can divide them both by 3, and I get 4 and 3, and that's it. So 3 times 4 is 12, times 3 is 36. So 36 is the bottom number here. So we're going to do 12 and 5, both multiplying by 3, because 3 times 12 is 36. And then for the 9 times 4 is 36. We're going to multiply these both by 4. So 5 times 3 is 15. And then 2 times 4 is 8. There you go for this one. Okay, now we got 3 of these. So let's go ahead and do this. We're going to look at 4, 8, and 10. I can divide these all by 2. So 4 divided by 2 is 2, 8 divided by 2 is 4, and 10 divided by 2 is 5. I'm not done yet. I can divide these again by 2. I get 2 divided by 2 is 1. 4 divided by 2 is 2, and 5 can't be divided, so it just stays as 5. Now I can multiply. So I have 2 times 2 is 4, times 2 is 8, times 5 is 40. So these are all going to be over 40. Okay, so 40 or 4 times 10 is 40, so 3 times 10 is 30. 8 times 5 is 40, so 5 times 5 is 25. Then finally, 10 times 4 is 40, so 1 times 4 is 4. And there are your new fractions for the same denominator. Okay, so for number 5, 6, 7, and 8, we want to compare and complete the blanks here. Now I'm going to give you a little hint of doing this. One way you could do this is you can rewrite them as common, the same fraction, a fraction with the same denominator. Here's another way of doing it. If you have just one simple fraction compared to another, you can do what's called cross products. So 5 times 5 is 25, and 6 times 4 is 24. And 25 is bigger than 24, therefore this fraction, 5/6, is bigger than 4/5. That's one way of proving it. Again, I can do this again over here. I can say 8 times 5 is 40. And I can say 3 times 14 would be, 42? Again, making this less than symbol. Now over here, I have 2 and 2/5 compared to 24 over 10. So I'm going to rewrite both of these. I'm going to rewrite the one on the left as an improper. I'm going to make it 10 12/5. And the bottom one I'm going to simplify, divide both by 2. And I get 12/5 as well. So this is actually equal. And then finally, I have 9 25ths, and I have 4, and I have 4 and 9 25ths, and I have 4 and 7 20ths. Well, I have a couple ways of doing this. I'm going to rewrite it this way. This is just one way of doing it. I'm going to make this over 100, and this is going to be over 100 as well. 25, like a quarter, times 4 gets me 100, so 9 times 4 is 36. 20 times 5 gets me 100, so 5 times 7 is 35. These are really close, but it ends up being greater than. All right? So now we're going to look at 9 through 16. These are going to be adding, subtracting. You can use any method you want, but you do have to come up with the common denominators. I'm going to trust you on this. I'm going to go ahead and pause this, I'm going to work through them with you real quick after you finish yours, and we'll see how you do, okay? So pause this, try them out, and then see how you do. I will talk to you here in a bit. Okay, let's take a look, see how we did on these. All right, so for 2/3 and 3/4, I'm going to rewrite them to begin with. And I know these are both are going to be twelfths. So these are both going to go over 12. So 2/3 you're going to multiply by 4. And so 3 times 4 is 12, 2 times 4 is 8. And then I have 4 times 3 is 12, and 3 times 3 is 9. So I end up getting 17 twelfths, which is the same thing as 1 and 5 twelfths. All right? So let's try our next one out. Over here, 7 and 2 are both prime numbers, so I can just multiply the first 1/2 by 7. I can multiply 6/7 by 2. We get the same denominator. So we have 14, because 2 times 7 is 14. 2 times 6 is 12. Plus 2 times 7 is 14. 7 times 1 is 7. I can add these together, and I get 12 plus 7 is 19. And then that's over 14, which is the same thing as 1 and 5/14. All right, so let's go to our next problem here. So we have 10 and 12. So we'll do this up here, the 10 and the 12. I can divide these both by 2, and I get 5 and 6. 5 times 6 is 30. 30 times 2 is 60. So 60 is the least common multiple. So I'm going to multiply the 10 and the 7 both by 6, which gives me 42. And then we'll multiply 5 by 5, because 12 times 5 is 60, give me 25. If I have 45 minus 25, I have 20. I have 3 less, so it's 17. So I have 17 over 60. And that is all she wrote for that problem. Let's go ahead and try our last one here. I have 18 and 8, so I'm going to put my 18 and 8 over here. I can divide these both by 2, and I get 9 and 4. Nothing else I can factor out, so I'm going to do 9 times 4 is 36, times 2 is 72. So I'm going to put a 72 and a 72, and I'll subtract away. So 18. As you can see here up at the top, we have 2 times 9 is 18, so it must be times 4. So we'll multiply these both by 4. So 18 times 4 is 72. 13 times 4 would be, what, 52? Minus, and I'm going to do 9 times 8. Oops, 9 times 8 gets us 72, so 9 times 5 is 45. And when I subtract these out, 52 minus 45 gets us 7 over that 72. All right, hopefully you did well in those top 4. Let's look at the bottom 4 over here now. So I have 2 and 1/6. plus 3 4/9. And I'm going to use the common denominator of 18. So I multiply these by 3 and these by 2. And so I get 2 and 3/18. And on the bottom here I get 3 and 8/18. Because 4 times 2 is 8, 9 times 2 is 18. So I'm going to go ahead and combine these, and I get 8 plus 3 is 11, so 11/18. And I have 2 plus 3 is 5, so 5. So 5 and 11/18. There's my first one. So for 14, you guys are doing great. Hang in there. I have 4 and 3/16. And then I have 1 and 1/2. Oh, I'm sorry, 1 and 1/10. I'm adding. So 16 and 10. Well, this one's a little bit tougher. Let's go ahead and try this up here. We'll do 16 and 10. You can divide them both by 2, and I get 8 and I get 5. Multiply these together. 8 times 5 is 40, times 2 is 80. So 80 is our bottom number. I'm going to put my 4 here and my 1 here. And these are over 80. And so 16, as you can see here, 2 times 8 is 16, so times 5. And then 10 times 8, so 1 times 8. So 3 times 5 is 15. 1 times 8 is 8. Easier than you thought, right? So 15 plus 8 gets me 23, so 23 over 80. And then 4 plus 1 is 5. So I have 5 and 23/80ths. 2 more problems and we are there. Okay, you guys are doing a good job. I know it's not easy. It's not easy. So we have 1 5/6 minus 3/4. Interesting. We'll discuss this here in a second. So I'm going to go ahead and 4 and 6 I can use 12. So I'm going to have 1. This is over 12 minus 12 over here. And if you want to, you can put a 0 right here just to hold the place. So I'm going to multiply 3 and 4 both by 3, because 4 times 3 is 12. So 3 times 3 is 9. But then over here, I need to multiply by 2, because 6 times 2 is 12, so 5 times 2 is 10. So 10 minus 1, 10 minus 9 is 1, so 1/12. 1 minus 0 is 1, so I have 1 and 1/12. And finally, home stretch. I got 3 2/3 minus 2 4/11. Since these are both prime numbers, I can just multiply them by each other. And I will get 33 for the denominator. Okay, and I multiply 11 by 3, so 4 by 3 is 12. And then I multiply 3 by 11, so 2 by 11 is 22. And this is going to be 3 up here, and this is 2 over here. And it's subtraction. So 22 minus 12 is 10 over 33. 3 minus 2 is 1. So I got 1 and 10 over 33. Hopefully you had a little bit more room than I had, and you were able to show this work with no problem. This is how it works. I know it's a 30-minute one, but you get the rest of your time off, and best of luck with this. I'll talk to you later. Let me know if you have any questions. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Drop the bass, but on the part 2 tip. Come take a trip to the way I rock your lip. Madness is on the mic and I'm rolling. The bass magic is controlling. It don't work that way, so let me see you sway. Because I room with the boomers when you ought to stay. Yo, Michael, let's grab this place. I think it's time you drop that